at the dusk of the 9th century, seeing the politically divided lands of the Carpathian Basin and the approaching warmongering tribes of the Pechens at their east, the Hungarian leadership set in motion that plan in which their people conquer a new homeland from which a prosperous kingdom will rise centuries later. This event was the Hungarian Landtaking, or in their language, the Conquest of the Homeland. Although this plan was in the making for many years, the events of history unfolded in such a way that Grandprince Árpád and his nation started their final journey in 895. Jumping back a year in time, we are writing 894. The Byzantine Empire imposed severe restriction on Bulgarian merchants trading in the empire. In response, Simeon, Bulgarian ruler, launched a campaign against the empire. At this time, however, the Byzantines were occupied by the quickly expanding Arabian Empire, so Emperor Leo the Wise sent envoys to chieftain Árpád, son of Árpád, and Kursan, who lived in the foregrounds of the Carpathians. According to their alliance, Árpád sent his son Levente against the Bulgarians, who surrounded the enemy from the north, while the Byzantine forces did the same from the south. Simeon suffered a crushing defeat and barely escaped into the castle of Silistra. The Hungarians then plundered northern Bulgaria and returned to the principality with their riches. In the same year, the conflict between King Arnold of East Francia and Svatopluk, Duke of Moravia, escalated into an armed strife. However, unlike the fightings from 2 years ago, the Hungarian armies entered into an alliance with Svatopluk this time. The Hungarians ravaged the Frankic-Kingdom Pannonia, and according to a contemporary source, its population was wiped out to the last soul. Although the Fulden yearbook clearly exaggerates the Hungarian destruction, it was certain that the loss of lives was great among the native population. When we look at parallels of other nomadic tribes, we can see that the slaughter of inhabitants was a common practice for them to make future occupations easier. During these campaigns, events in Asia Minor were set in motion, the changes of which echoed all the way through to the lands occupied by the Hungarians. In the Arabian Empire, the reign of Ahmed Ismail I of the Samanid dynasty began. In 893, he launched an attack at the tribes living around the Aral Sea, which resulted in a chain of migrations. This led to the appearance of the Pechens on the eastern side of the Dnieper River in 894. The Hungarian memory must have been vivid with all the suffering they endured from their tribes, so in order to avoid this, they launched the conquest of the Carpathian Basin in the spring of the following year. From this point, the focus of the chronicles are shifting towards Grandprince Árpád, so we can assume that Árpád was approaching his final days. The Chronicon Picton paints his death with the following lines. Árpád was killed in the lands of Transylvania, for he could not enter Pannonia, a reference to the ritual sacrifice of the ruler, in which his strength and wisdom passed on to his successor. So in the spring of 895, Grandprince Árpád entered the Carpathian Basin with his people through the Vereska Pass, according to legends. Their plan was certainly known among the Bulgarians, who knew well if the Hungarians succeed in their mission, they will lose all their domain over the Great Plains and Transylvania. This led to a quickly formed alliance with the Pechens and waited for their moment to strike, just when the Hungarian main forces were out retaliation distance. The Hungarian rearguard, greatly outnumbered, fought with the aggressors and died protecting their women and livestock. Although the devastation was great, it wasn't total. Those who were able to escape the sudden attack headed for the eastern Carpathians and joined their people in Transylvania. The Pechens settled on the old Hungarian lands, and neither they nor the Bulgarians attempted to confront their actual main forces, so albeit at great sacrifice, they completed the first phase of their conquest. For the next 5 years, the accounts are silent in the regards of the Hungarians. This can be explained by the fact that it took this long to replace the manpower and horse herd lost in the raid. Their next campaign began in the spring of 899, which cause was the election of Berengar for the Italian throne, nemesis of Arnulf. The Frankic king formed a military alliance with the Hungarians, who, with an army of 5,000, marched to the Italian kingdom on a path that were known to be as Strata Hungarorum on the pages of history, meaning the road of Hungarians. They attempted to lay siege to Venice in the summer, but they were repelled by the Doge's fleet. After that, they headed for the Po Valley, where many cities were ravaged. By the beginning of autumn, King Berengar mustered 15,000 men against the invaders. The Hungarians did not wish to fight an army 3 times their size and offered to return their stolen goods for a free departure, but Berengar, confident in his victory, refused the offer. The two armies made camp on the two sides of the river, waiting for battle. The Hungarians, however, under the cover of the night, crossed the river and ambushed the unprepared Italians. Their remarkable swiftness is indicated in some sources, which mentions that some soldiers had their food pierced in their throats. After the massacre of Berengar's army, they continued to ravage Lombardy and returned to home in the spring of the following year with plenty of loot and a large tribute that the king offered for their departure. In the meantime, King Arnulf passed away, ending their oath. The corps, arriving from Italy, joined their main forces in Transdanubia, and together they seized Pannonia without any significant resistance. They sent envoys to King Louis IV in order to get their new borders recognized, but he chased them away. In response, 2 Hungarian armies were sent to Bavaria, who marched along the 2 sides of the Danube. Although Prince Luitpold managed to defeat the northern forces, and hastily built the castle of Einsburg against the southern army, they simply bypassed the fortress and looted the lands far beyond it. With the end of this campaign, the conquest of the Carpathians, and with it the Hungarian home-taking, was completed. However, the region's new power still stood on fragile bases, since neither the Moravians nor the Bavarians were happy about the new neighbors and formed an anti-Hungarian alliance. In response, the Hungarian army marched against Moravia in 902, at this time with the intent to destroy it. After the fall of Wrocław Castle, the Carpathian parts of Moravia fell to the Hungarian Grand Principality, and those beyond it became their tributaries. By 904, the Bavarian-Hungarian relationship became tenser and tenser. They invited Árpád's co-ruler, Prince Kursán, to a feast to settle their differences. The Hungarian delegation, however, refused the return of Pannonia, so they were massacred, thus ending the institution of the Hungarian diarchy and giving way to Árpád's monarchy. The greatest test of the Hungarian power comes in 907. Louis IV, by the advice of his council, attempted to eliminate the Hungarian threat permanently. Their plan was to replicate the campaign of Charlemagne, who waged a similar war against the Avars 100 years before. The king ordered the recruitment of troops under Einsburg Castle. The army began their march at the 7th of June along the Danube, following the limes and its ancient fortifications built by the Romans. For faster movement, they divided the forces into 3 columns. The armies north of the Danube were commanded by Prince Luitpold, while the southern regiments were led by Theodore, Archbishop of Salzburg, with several high-ranking clergy. The fleet, which was responsible for carrying supplies and the infantry, was under the leadership of Prince Sighard and many Bavarian lords. Their first objective was to capture Pressburg, which, thanks to its strategic location, was the perfect place to spearhead further campaigns to both the Upperlands and Transdanubia. Although the splitting of the Bavarian armies proved to be beneficial in the regards of speed, this decision will be their biggest mistake in the battles to come. The number of armies is not exactly known, but it can be estimated around 20,000 for the Hungarians, led by an unknown commander, while the Bavarians had several times of that. The movement of their northern army was halted by the Moravia River, and they had to use the fleet's help in order to cross it, so the southern column marched without support towards the fortress. This was the Hungarians' chance to strike. Taking advantage of the terrain, the Hungarian horse archers started to battle the enemy's ranks and loosened up the Bavarian battle line. In order to cross the gap between them, the European knights charged at the Hungarians, but they suddenly withdrew. Blinded by hatred and the urge to decide the battle, Theomar ordered the pursuit of the fleeing horsemen. He could not have known at this time that this was the very moment when he sealed his fate. Crossing a certain point, his army was hit by the rain of arrows from both sides. The hidden Hungarian reserve started their ambush. The retiring troops suddenly changed course and quickly encircled the Bavarians. After hours of relentless fighting, their ranks finally broke on the 4th of July and fled through the gap deliberately left by the Hungarians. This strategy was the feigned retreat, a beloved tactic used by many horse-riding nations. The Hungarian command sent a smaller contingent to hunt down the fleeing Bavarians, while most of their army headed north. They crossed the Danube under the cover of the night and quickly massacred the camping knights of Luitpold, who were unaware about the events to their south. The balance of power shifted completely, as only the Bavarian infantry remained, stuck on their barges. They made a desperate attempt to land under constant arrow storm, but when they learned about the fate of their comrades, they tried to flee in every direction they could. The scale of the devastation was enormous. Among the fallen were Prince Luitpold, Archbishop Theomar, 3 bishops, 3 abbots, and 19 Bavarian lords, along with most of the soldiers, while the Hungarians only suffered minimal casualties. The unprotected Bavaria was at the mercy of the Hungarians, where they plundered countless cities. Although Grandprince Árpád died around the time of the battle in old age, he may have seen the glorious triumph of his armies. During his reign, he not only made a permanent nation for his people, but ensured its survival with the Battle of Pressburg. The fierceness of the Hungarian warriors etched itself into the European consciousness, and for the next 123 years, no one dared to challenge them from the Western powers.